These trainings are created to help people restore urban natural areas to healthy ecosystems by removing invasive plants and planting native plants. Cascade Land Conservancy, Seattle Parks and Recreation, and Tahoma Audubon Society created these trainings with funding from the USDA Forest Service Urban and Community Forestry Program.
Plant propagation is growing plants from seed or taking parts of plants like stems, roots, or leaves and getting those to form new plants. It's a very cost-effective way to increase plants on your site. My name's Jeannie Taylor, and I'm going to demonstrate at the Washington Native Plant Society Nursery today how to do the live stake method of propagation. Live stakes are a type of hardwood cutting that's taken late in the growing season, preferably after the leaves have fallen off, although you can remove the leaves if you need to. The ideal type of wood is the older wood, 2 or 3 years old is about right, and you can tell where that is by looking at the stem. The older wood is usually a different color, and it may be a little rougher. The newer growth is usually a little smoother and not quite as hard. Here is this season's growth, and there may be another year here, and then this would be the 3rd year. Often you can tell because there's a few scars where the bud scales have fallen off at the beginning of each year's growth. After the cuttings are taken, they're sunk in the ground where they can form roots over the remaining months of the fall into the winter and the spring to support the new growth. Not all species are useful for live stakes. Only the most easily rooted species are used. In western Washington, some of these are willows, cottonwood, red twig dogwood, snowberry, Pacific 9 bark, and black twinberry. These species have proven successful as live stakes. When you select your stems for cuttings, look for stems that are about 3/8 to 1.5 inches in diameter. And the cutting itself will be anywhere from a 1.5 foot to 3 feet long. The main thing is you want to get at least 3 nodes on your cutting, and those are the places where the branches come out from the stem, where the buds are. When you make your cut, you want to cut either down at the base of the plant, right at the ground, or if you need to cut a side branch, make sure you cut it right where it joins the stem. That'll be a clean cut that will heal over, and the plant can then grow from that point without having disease come in. If you have to cut higher on the stem, just make sure you cut right above that node so the plant doesn't have any dead material above that. I'm going to cut a stake from this plant right at the base where it joins the stem. Once you get your cutting, you want to remove all the leaves, and in this case we're going to remove the side branches so you have just a straight, smooth stem. And I can get about 2 stakes out of this stem. When you cut your stem, again, make sure you cut right above the node. Make a straight cut at the top. And a slanted cut at the base. That way it's easier to get it in the ground, and you also know which end is up because the flat ends are always at the top. So we have a large stake from the base, and we've got room for one more stake out of this cutting. First thing you want to do is make sure the side shoots are cut off. And when you take the leaves off, that prevents the leaves from pulling moisture out of the cutting. You want to make sure your cuttings stay moist. So at this point I have some fairly large side shoots that we can also use, so keep those. I'm going to make the cut at the top, the cross cut, and the cut at the base. Now you cut it right above a node, so you have a big section with no nodes. It's okay if you leave a little bit at the base because it can root there. These species that root easily will often put out roots that are not right at the nodes. So this is the base where you want to have a slanted cut, and there's the second stake. With these side shoots, if they're large enough, usually we can take these, they're called whips. We can take these and put them together in a pot and actually root them. Here's some 9 bark that was rooted about a year ago, and these are the smaller stems that we used for that. So make sure you remove all the leaves again and kind of use the stems that are not real flexible. They're just barely flexible, but they're thick enough to actually form some roots. The smaller the stem, the more likely it is that they won't quite have enough energy to root. Now if you're going to plant your stakes right away, but you say the same day, you want to take care to make sure that they don't dry out. So after you take a bundle of stakes, you can put them in a bucket of water or even a pot of soil if it's going to be a day or two, but keep them in the shade and make sure they stay moist and cool until you put them in the ground. If you're going to wait and not plant them for, say, a couple of months, or if you want to root them and then plant them, you can bundle them up like these Indian plums and put them in a big pot of soil. And the main thing again is just to keep them moist. And you can put the pots in sawdust over the winter and they will root in the pots. And then of the following year you can plant them. And over the summer is when they will need a little bit of extra watering. You want to make sure again that they don't dry out, and mulching them with sawdust and wood chips will help with that and keep the pots cool. This is what they look like after about a year of being in the pot. And you want to separate these out, ready for planting or for repotting, fairly carefully. This is a good root ball, so what you can do is just cut through it into sections and then very gently tease the roots apart. You want to probably loosen up the roots, and a little bit of wounding will actually help them root more, but you want to be fairly careful with those new roots, and it will take a little bit of time for them to recover even after a careful repotting. Now that you have your live stakes, you want to find a good place in the landscape for them. You want to pick a spot that stays moist as late into the growing season as possible. So live stakes are normally used along streams and seeps in the ground or lakes where the water table will be high. You don't want a place that will be flooded though in winter and spring, because that's when the stakes are growing roots and that will drown them. So you need a well aerated and moist spot. You have the pointed end of the stake is the bottom. So you place that in the ground, hold it firmly with two hands and just press straight down. And this one isn't going too far into the ground. So what I'm going to do is use a piece of rebar and a sledgehammer to make a hole instead of pounding on the stake. So the top node is here. The next node is right down here. We could go a little bit deeper if we could get it down there, but this will be okay because we've got at least 2 or 3 nodes below the ground, and that's where the roots are going to form. So when you get your stake in the ground, you want to press the soil firmly around it to make sure you have contact where the roots are going to come out. You don't want any air pockets where the roots are. Then it's a good idea to add some wood chips around your stakes. Make sure that you conserve as much moisture as possible. And then come back frequently and check to see that the stakes are still in the ground. And if you painted the top of your stake, that will make them more visible if people are working in the area or if people are passing through. And then check to make sure that they're moist as possible. All the stakes that you plant probably won't root. Rarely do you get 100% success. It usually takes about a year for plants to start showing that they really have established. A full 3 years for a mature plant to establish. You can check on your plants to see how they're doing in early to midsummer by going through and just pulling on the stems a little bit. If you can imagine these stakes spread out through your landscape, you could go and one by one you could sort of test to see if you get any resistance. That would mean that they have roots. This one doesn't have any roots, so you would know that it's not successful. But some of the other ones, especially the ones with leaves that stay on late into the season, if you pull on them, you can't pull them out and you get a lot of resistance. That usually means that they're getting rooted well, and you should continue to take care of them, mulch them and weed them, and not really disturb them too much, at least for a year. Then if they're in a pot, you can repot them. If they're in the landscape, after about a year you'll know which ones are really taking a hold. Again, it takes about 3 years for them to grow to maturity and for their roots to find the groundwater moisture, so you need to take care of them and make sure that they're well weeded in the meantime. So now we've done live stakes from start to finish. I'm just going to recap what we've learned. First, choose species that are easily rooted. On the plant, find a stem that is 2 to 3 years old and about 1/2 to 1.5 inches in diameter. Make a cut at the base of the plant or near a main stem, right above a node to protect the plant after you've cut it. Once you have your branch, you'll cut the stakes into 1.5 to 3 foot lengths. The base will have a slanting cut. The top end will have a flat cut, so you'll know which end is up. Then find a moist place in the landscape to place them. Mulch them well, keep them weeded. Finally, it's important to monitor annually to determine the percentage of live stakes that have established.